Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article is speaking about death penalty. It makes a mention of rarest of the rare case doctrine. Let us try and understand what is this issue all about. First up, let's look into the context. A special court in Gujarat was hearing a case with respect to 2008 serial blast. In this particular serial blast, about 56 persons were killed, over 200 people were injured. The special court heard the arguments made by the prosecution and defense and is finally delivered its judgment, where it has awarded death penalty to about 38 people and has also put 11 people to life imprisonment. So the convicts were members of the Indian Mujahideen. So let us try and understand what is this death penalty or the capital punishment, and we will also look into the rarest of the rare case doctrine. What is death penalty? Death penalty, also called as capital punishment. What would happen if a person is imposed with death penalty by the judiciary in India? His life will be snatched away by the procedure established by law. So capital punishment or death penalty is nothing but taking away the life of a person by hanging him so that this person does not disturb the peace and tranquility existing in the society. So death penalty or capital punishment is nothing but taking away, snatching away the life of a person. How? By hanging this person by neck until death. Now what we have to look at is called as the rarest of the rare case doctrine. When is a person given this death penalty, for which what we have is a judicial innovation called as the rarest of the rare case doctrine. Before we understand what is this rarest of the rarest case doctrine, we have to understand whether the snatching away of the life is constitutionally right or wrong. For the very first time, the case that dealt with the constitutional validity of capital punishment in India happens to be Jagmohan Singh versus the state of Uttar Pradesh. What was this case all about? The accused in this particular case goes to the Supreme Court. In the Supreme Court, he says that this particular death penalty is violating Article 14. It is also violating Article 21. How is it violating Article 14? Let's say, for example, in this particular case, who will impose the death penalty? It is the judiciary. So the judiciary has no prescribed standards on its own. Even for a minor error, the judiciary can impose death penalty as well. So there is no equal protection for all citizens. There is too much of discretion given to the judiciary, since there is no equal protection for all the citizens and the judiciary does not have a standard. It says that there is violation of Article 14 in Jagmohan Singh versus the state of Uttar Pradesh. Added to it, the state is snatching away the life of a person, and this means the right to live is also getting violated. So the accused says that Article 14 is getting violated, Article 21 is getting violated, and ultimately the Supreme Court looks into this particular case and it says that it is not violating Article 21. Why? Because a person, when he is given a chance, he is heard by the judiciary in India, and ultimately after he is heard by the judiciary, if his innocence is not proved by the procedure established by law, we are snatching away the life of a person. So it holds all the constitutional principles, says the Supreme Court of India in Jagmohan Singh versus the state of Uttar Pradesh. So for the first time, the constitutionality of the capital punishment was heard by the Supreme Court in Jagmohan Singh versus the state of Uttar Pradesh. This was also confirmed in the Rajendra Prasad versus the state of Uttar Pradesh. It also said that in the case of capital punishment, if there is a hardened murderer who cannot be rehabilitated by the society and death penalty is imposed in extraordinary circumstances and there is a special reason accorded, then death penalty or the capital punishment can be imposed on a person in Rajendra Prasad versus the state of UP, says the Supreme Court of India. But for the first time, the idea of rarest of the rare case came in Bachan Singh versus the state of Punjab. Until then, we did not have the rarest of the rare doctrine, but for the first time, the judiciary introduces this particular principle called as rarest of the rare case doctrine. So only if a particular scenario or a murder or an instance goes through this rarest of the rare case, only then capital punishment or death penalty can be imposed on a person. Yes, the judiciary did say about noted. However, it did not define what this window of rarest of rare cases is all about. That is where in the Supreme Court of India, finally, in Machi Singh versus the state of Punjab, the judiciary lays down the protocols and the guidelines. The first principle laid out in Machi Singh versus the state of Punjab is the manner in which the murder was committed. So if we are looking into the manner in which it was committed, it has to be a violent one, it has to be a devilish one, it has to be in a manner which cannot be accepted by the society. So if there is a victim's house which is put fire, where a person's body is roasted and the person wanted to do that, that happens to be the rarest of the rare doctrine. If a person's body is cut into pieces, that is the rarest of a rare principle. Or if a person is giving torture to another person that has led to the death of another individual, that is also called as cruelty. So the first point to be noted is the manner in which the murder was committed. If it is heinous in nature, and if it is violent, if it is absurd, if it is devilish, in such a case that person can be imposed with death penalty. The second is about the murder motive. Let's say for example, if it is a cold-blooded murder where it was planned, or a serial killer was also hired for the sake of a monetary reward, in such a case the murder motive is also considered as the second principle. The third is the nature of crime which is socially unacceptable. Let's say for example, it is committed against the SC or the ST community, whereby when it is committed on such a community, they want such a community to live a particular region and go to a different region. The objective of the crime is considered, and if it is unacceptable, it is targeting a particular religious group or a minority group or the SC/ST community, where they want such a community to move from one region to another, that is also considered rarest of the rare case doctrine principle. The fourth is the intensity of the crime, where we consider the magnitude of the crime, where there is enormity in the proportion. Let's say for example, an entire family is killed, or for example an entire region and its people are killed, or for example a person of a particular caste or a community or locality are committing this particular crime on certain section of the people. That is what is called as intensity of the crime. So when large number of people are murdered, that is what is called as intensity or the magnitude of the crime. And finally, the personality of the victim of the murder as well. In this particular case, let's say there is a young child or a hapless woman or a age-old person. If the person, the accused, has committed an heinous act, then in such a case this will also be called under the doctrine of rarest of the rare cases. So if any of these instances are met, and if the judiciary feels that life imprisonment cannot be given to this particular person, reformation of this individual cannot be taken up, and as the last option, this person will be given death penalty as per the principle of rarest of the rare case doctrine. So remember, the death penalty in the Indian judicial system can be imposed only when there is no other option left. This person cannot be reformed, and it is meeting any of these principles as laid out in Machi Singh versus the state of Punjab. And also remember, we have another video recorded by Sarmat sir with respect to the capital punishment. It also gives you arguments in favor of the capital punishment. It also gives you an argument against the capital punishment as well. The link will be provided in the video, so kindly look into it. Now let's look into the next article. This article says India needs a refugee and an asylum law. This article is written by the Member of Parliament. What is the context? We have the Member of Parliament Shashi Tharoor, who is also the author of this article, who has introduced a bill called as the Asylum Bill. So this particular bill will help in protecting the refugees and the asylum seekers. So this will be on the basis of the conventions that are present in Indian laws and the Constitution, on the principles of the Constitution and India's international obligations. So the author in this particular case says that India will have to come up with a protection law so that we are able to protect the refugees as well as the asylum seekers. Let us try and understand what is this article all about. When we consider India, India is a land of diversity. We've also protected people from multiple religion, multiple cultures, so on and so forth. In the past, we have protected the Jews, we have protected the Zoroastrians, we have protected the Tibetans from the hegemony of China. We have also helped the Bangladeshis when there was a tussle between East Pakistan and West Pakistan back in 1971. We also safeguarded the rights of Bangladeshis as well. And finally, when there was issues in Sri Lanka between the LTTE, between the Tamil and the governments, finally Sri Lankan Tamils were also protected and safeguarded by India as well. So India is known as a country, a land where it has protected and it has safeguarded the rights of millions of people who've come from a different country because they were persecuted in a different region or in a particular country. But of late, this is not the case. Why? Because there have been n number of examples where the author says the government has not given importance to the principle of non-refoulement. What is this principle of non-refoulement? Let's take the example of Afghanistan, or let's take the example of Myanmar. In Afghanistan, we have the takeover by Taliban. They are not respecting the minority viewpoints. In Myanmar, you have the Rohingyas. The Rohingyas are persecuted by the people and the government in Myanmar. So what do? They come to India, or they may go to any other country as well. So the principle of non-refoulement says that no country should send a person to a place where he or she may face the persecution, since these Rohingyas and the minorities in Afghanistan are facing the persecution. They should not be sent to their home country, is the principle of non-refoulement. According to the author, in few instances, Myanmar's two batches of Rohingya refugees were sent back to Myanmar. There was also an attempt made where Chakmas in Arunachal Pradesh were asked to go back as well, and Afghan students whose visa had expired, their renewal proceedings were also delayed. So the author goes on to say that this is a violation of non-refoulement. Since there is a violation of non-refoulement, what we required is a bill and an act, says the author. When we look into the laws, we do not have a domestic law in picture. India is also not a signatory to 1951 United Nations Refugee Convention. On one side, we are not part of the international obligation. On the other side, we do not have a domestic law. What we have is number of laws, no single uniform law. That is, we have the Foreigners Act of 1946, the Registration of Foreigners Act of 1939, the Passports Act of 1967, the Extradition Act of 1962, Citizen Act of 1955. All this means we do not have a single domestic law. This leads to a lot of ambiguity. It also means when there is a lot of ambiguity, it is the executive which come into picture, the bureaucrats, the police officers, in fact the politicians have their own decision making, and everything works on the whims and fancies of the political party and also the executive. So the author goes on to say, since we do not have a domestic law, we are not signatories to the 1951 UN Refugee Convention, there is a need for a law, and we do not have the authorities working on the whims and fancies with their discretion. So the author in this particular case says that the refugees have to be protected and the asylum seekers will also have to be protected. What are the provisions of this particular bill? The author makes a simple definition of the refugees. Who are the refugees? It is all those people who have the fear of persecution in their country. Let's take for example Afghanistan or Myanmar. People are fearing that they may lose their lives either because of the grounds of race, religion, nationality, membership to a particular social group, or political opinion. If on any of this basis, if they are getting killed or they fear that they may go through the persecution, in such a case, such a person will be called as a refugee. But if there is a person who is looking for better opportunities, who is looking for a quest of economic betterment, or is fleeing that particular country because of poverty or environment disaster or anarchy, does not qualify as refugees. So what qualifies as refugees? What does not qualify as refugee? A clear mandate has been put up in this asylum bill. Added to it, all foreigners, irrespective of which religion they are from, which caste they are from, which nationality they are from, which race they are from, which religion they follow, which ethnicity they belong to. All foreigners will be provided the refugee status and asylum seeking power under this asylum bill, says Shashi Tharoor. Added to it, we require what is called as the National Commission for Asylum, where this would be constituted to decide all such applications. If there is a person who is seeking for the asylum, he has to make application to the National Commission for Asylum, and ultimately it will decide whether that particular person will have to be provided or not. Added to it, it is not just about protecting them, giving them shelter in our homes, but it is also about empowering them to work in our country so that these people do not have to go through the issues of human trafficking, says the author. In fact, the author also goes on to say the judiciary holds a similar view as well, where the Supreme Court in the past has asked the state to protect all human beings irrespective of the nationality, since every single person has to enjoy the rights accorded under Article 14 and 21, which speaks about right to life. So in the NHRC versus the state of Arunachal Pradesh, the Supreme Court of India stopped the forcible eviction of Chakma refugees who had entered into Arunachal Pradesh back in the year 1995. Since the judiciary is in line with the international obligations, and India being a signatory to number of human rights convention has to respect it. So basically, if India does accept this asylum bill and if this becomes a law, India's long-standing and continuing commitment to humanitarian and democratic values will continue to persist with the refugees, says the author. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says INB Ministry wants officials on data security. We have the Information Broadcasting Ministry, which has prohibited sharing of top secret and secret documents by its officials over the internet. Why? Because such practice may also lead to information being accessed over the internet by other people. It can be hacked as well. So what this article suggests is whenever there is sharing of information, this should happen on a secured network. So this article goes on to say the digital assistant devices, which includes Apple's HomePod, Google's Home and Amazon's Echo, should not be used in the office premises. We should turn off the digital assistants, which are nothing but Amazon's Alexa, Apple Siri, and when they are entering the meetings, smartphones should be kept outside the meeting room. In fact, the Information and Broadcasting Ministry has also said number of officers, in fact departments, have violated the departmental security instructions and the National Information Security Policy guidelines. So in this particular backdrop, the Information and Broadcasting Ministry has made some recommendations with respect to the future course of action. Before we understand what are these recommendations, we have to understand the meaning of classified information. The classified information is the secret information. This can be divided into top secret, secret, confidential information and restricted information. What is the top secret information? It is the information whose unauthorized disclosure could be expected to cause exceptionally grave damage to national security or national interest. The category is reserved for nations' closest secrets. Then we have secret information whose disclosure may cause serious damage to national security or national interest or serious embarrassment to the government. It is used for highly important matters and is the highest classification normally used. Then we have confidential information, which is the information that might cause damage to national security, be prejudicial to national interest, might embarrass the government. Then we have restricted information, which is applied to information meant only for official use, which is not to be published or communicated to any person except for the official purposes. And all those documents which do not require security classification are regarded as the unclassified information. So who does this? We have the departmental security instructions, which are issued by the Ministry of Home Affairs. So on the basis of this categorization, they have to categorize all the documents that are present in India. So we have the Information and Broadcasting Ministry, which has made a recommendation that the classification of top secret or secret information should not be degraded or downgraded to confidential or restricted for the purposes of sharing it over the internet. Just because you want to share this information on the internet, it does not mean you can downgrade a particular information from top secret or secret to confidential and restricted is the first recommendation. Then whenever you're sending a particular data, this particular data has to be sent on a scientific analysis group grade encryption. So this scientific analysis group is a functionary under the DRDO. So what does it do? It makes an innovation continuously with respect to the communication, the innovation with respect to the mode of communication. So the SAC functions under the DRDO. It is located in Delhi, and its primary function is to come up with new innovative methods so that we can use all these channels for sending our data and communicating. So the ministry has also recommended use of government email facility or government instant messaging platforms such as Center for Development Advanced Computing Samvad and the National Information Center Sandesh for communicating such information. So rather than sending it on open platforms like WhatsApp, Telegram, what you can make use of is these one which are authenticated by the government of India, says this article. Now let's look into the mains practice questions. Should the judiciary revisit the doctrine of rarest of the rare cases for awarding death penalty? Critically examine. India has a long history of sheltering refugees, and it is high time that a domestic law to protect the persecuted is in place. Discuss. So please write all your answers on the comment section. Peer review. Do give positive feedback to your friends' answers. So that's it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.